चल रहा है ना? हेलो, ठीक है। Thank you everyone for joining us today. Before starting the session, I'll request all the panelists to please come on the stage. Dr. Barucha, may I please request you to be on the stage? Dr. Boaz. So, a very good afternoon and welcome to this session, which is focused on nature-based solutions and for climate action with focus on role of sustainability education. I really hope that you all had a good lunch and probably not too sleepy. But what I can assure you is that we have, like, our speakers have a lot to share with us today, and Dr. Barucha and Dr. Atto has promised me that this session is going to be a lot of fun, so stay attentive and enjoy it. Well, myself, Sheetal Antil, I'm the National Coordinator for Green Jobs at Climate Reality India, and also a full-time working professional at South Pole, where I'm navigating the complex carbon market and nature-based solution, on constant look of scalable nature-based solution for climate finance. And I'm very honored to, to be moderating this session, because I have worked quite a bit in climate education space and now working on nature-based solution space. So I really hope that this session is going to be very interesting and very timely. Well, as I said, that in this session we are going to talk about nature-based solution for climate action and role of sustainability education in amplifying nature-based solution. And the context for putting this session together is that we all very well know that we are in a mid of climate crisis, biodiversity crisis, and also parallelly fighting for unequitable development. And it has been and nature-based solutions are increasingly seen as a solution for climate crisis, for the solution which can protect our ecosystem biodiversity, and also parallelly can build resilience in our landscape and also in the community. And this has been pretty much validated in the latest IPCC report also, that nature-based solutions such as reduction in the destruction of forest and other ecosystem, restoring them, improving the management of working land such as farms, are among the top 5 strategies to mitigate the carbon emission by 2030. And it is also important to note that the nature-based solutions are just not only for the climate action. They also help in solving human health, food security, water crisis, and many other interconnected challenges which we are seeing these days. So while we have started talking about nature-based solution very widely, and you all have been hearing this term from quite some time, in last few years this has gained a lot of popularity, but to get it right is the key. And there we feel the education for nature, be it having the right knowledge, be it about right skills, competencies, training young generation, that is going to be the key. So, please. And in common term, it is very simple to say that if you plant trees, they are going to soak up the carbon, but it is not automatic that everything you plant become a nature-based solution. For example, planting a tree at wrong place can do more harm than a good. So understanding, getting into the nitty-gritties, having the right training skills are going to be the key if we have to amplify the nature-based solution. So in this session, we'll start by understanding more about nature-based solution. IUCN pioneered the concept of nature-based solution more than 2 decades ago, and IUCN is the first one to which developed a formal definition for what are nature-based solution, and then set the global standard for nature-based solution as a safeguard for their use. So to talk more about what exactly these NBS or nature-based solution are, how they are making a difference, we have Mrs. Archana Chatterjee from IUCN. She is leading Mangrove for Future initiative in India and has also been leading many other initiatives at IUCN. For example, Ecosystem for Life, which is a trans-boundary initiative between Bangladesh and India. Before joining IUCN, she has also worked with UNESCO on World Heritage Biodiversity Program. She has also headed Himalayan high-altitude wetland and rivers at WWF. And her primary area of expertise include wetland management, environment flows, and transboundary water management. Please welcome Mrs. Archana Chatterjee to deliver her presentation, and let's understand from her that what exactly nature-based solutions are.
Thank you so much, Sheetal, for this introduction. So I think Sheetal has set the context to the nature-based solutions, or NBS as we call them in short. So I work for an organization, IUCN, which many of you may be knowing, of course, International Union for Conservation of Nature. It's a membership union where even Government of India is a member, state member of IUCN. And we are an office established in Delhi in 2007 under an MOU with Government of India. So we are operational since 2007, but India has been a member since 1969. So coming to what is the rationale for nature-based solutions? As you would have noticed from various studies, there are a plethora of studies, IPCC, IPBES, and a lot of IUCN research itself. And this is a report from the World Economic Forum, which has highlighted global risks, and you would see a lot of green in it, which is the risks, the environmental related risks. And a lot of focus you would see is on the climate-related inactions that have, heightened the risk to human populations as well as our natural resource base. The biodiversity loss has emerged as a risk in their 21 report, and this is where the linkage of biodiversity loss and climate-related issues started happening. More and more recognition has been there that climate-related issues and biodiversity loss are issues that are joined at the hip, and we cannot address either of them without addressing both of them. So that's where I think the relevance of nature-based solution becomes very important. So as Sheetal mentioned, that nature-based solutions are not anything new as such. People have been, our communities, our policymakers, our practitioners have been working on these solutions, have been using them under different terminologies, which I'll come to a bit later. What IUCN did was to really streamline it, make it more coherent to give it more visibility and communicability as nature-based solutions. So nature-based solutions as defined by IUCN and also accepted by the UNIA these are actions to address societal challenges. So societal challenges is very important because we need solutions which can benefit the communities at the same time, their livelihoods, their resilience, and so on. So I won't go into the details of the definition. I think all of you know. And these are all the societal challenges, of course, the climate change, mitigation, DRR, economic and social development. All these are linked to the human beings, our society. And this is where the NBS can play an important role. It is not to say that the infrastructure related solutions become unimportant, but it is important to understand that a mix of two will really help in the long run, because some of these are very short-term solutions which can easily get dismantled. We have heard about the Libya disaster where the dam, the aging dam broke and killed so many people. I mean, and these are systems that are, risks that we are constantly exposed to. So this is what I was talking about, that the nature-based solutions is basically an umbrella term for a lot of these practices that we already have worked on, and we are working in various projects or programs that you may also be involved in. For example, ecosystem restoration approaches, or EBA, ecosystem-based adaptation, eco-DRR, ecosystem-based management, and so many other such approaches which come under this umbrella term. So just wanted to clarify that this is an umbrella term to bring into its ambit all the various approaches that people and communities have been practicing. So these basically, the NBS's potential to address complex challenges. For example, we have talked about a lot of these climate change related challenges, ecosystem degradation, and then it has long-term environmental, societal, and environmental benefits. As we all know, specifically, I would like to mention the green jobs which directly benefit the communities, health benefits. We have seen the COVID scares, so nature-based solutions can play a very big role there. And this is to show the difference between, we use various terminologies interchangeably. So just to place in context that nature-derived solutions, nature-inspired solutions are very different from nature-based solutions. So in nature-based solutions, the ecosystem has to play a very important role. That is where the solution is emerging from. Some figures to crunch upon. The flooding damages averted by mangroves. Sheetal mentioned mangroves. We have implemented a very strong Mangroves for the Future initiative in India, in almost all the coastal states wherever mangroves are present. And post-tsunami, the importance has been manifold for mangrove conservation. The climate change, the mitigation, IUCN research and other studies have proven that 1/3 of the climate mitigation impacts that are there can be, the nature-based solutions can play an important role. So all other things are of course important, the technologies, etc. But 1/3, nature-based solutions can also be used in conjunction with those things. And I was mentioning about green jobs. It is estimated that 20 million green jobs can be generated if investments in NBS were tripled by 2030. IUCN has been working, as have been other organizations, so we do know that nature-based solutions are available for agriculture, sustainable agriculture. Many of us use a lot of these practices, natural farming, organic farming, and so on, in our programs. For DRR, for ecosystem restoration. ICN has been working a lot on forest landscape restoration and the nature-based solutions for climate resilience and for cities. In the urban context too, nature-based solutions are increasingly playing an important role. You may have heard about green roofing and bioswales and so on. So these are all very much used in in the urban context, and of course the urban forests also. There is one other issue that we need to be very aware of, that in the Indian context, as some of you may be knowing, at the recent CBD COP, where the global biodiversity targets were adopted by all the countries, few of the countries, they wanted the word ecosystem based approach in the target language, in conjunction with the nature-based solutions. So many of the countries, including India, they were not very comfortable with the use of the word nature-based solutions. So this is again something which we need to be very cognizant of, that we are using both the terminologies, and they are not anti to each other, but they are more complementary and supplementary. So ecosystem-based approaches are, of course, and nature-based solutions are very much similar. So, but in the Indian context, we generally prefer usage of the terminology ecosystem-based approaches, and that has been reflected in the target languages also. Now coming very quickly to the ICN Global Nature-Based Solutions Standard, which was again introduced by Sheetal in her opening remarks. That why is this global standard needed? We tend to talk about a lot of things interchangeably, and nature-based solutions has become a very buzzword. But how do we measure that, whether it is, and test whether this is a nature-based solution or not? So that's where the IUCN come up with the global standard for nature-based solutions, which is built not as a top-down standard, but it's based on a lot of consultations that took place with various experts, with communities, indigenous communities, because indigenous communities have many times raised concerns about NBS making them alienated from their own homeland. So all these concerns have been kept in mind when designing the nature-based solution standards. So again, all the information is available on our website. The standards are available freely for use, and any guidance that is required, ICN is always there to provide that. So some of the criteria I would like to highlight, which reflects that this is really taking care of many of the concerns that were there with respect to the usage of the term nature-based solutions. So societal challenges is key. Design at scale. Scale is very important, because NBS are generally seen as that they cannot be scaled up. They are very location specific, and they cannot replace the infrastructure solutions. So biodiversity net gain is another very important criteria for using nature-based solutions. Economic feasibility, again, many a time nature-based solutions lose out to infrastructure solutions because sometimes the time investment is too huge, or the financial investments are too huge. So economic feasibility is again very important for designing the NBS. Inclusive governance, balancing trade-offs, adaptive management, and mainstreaming for sustainability. This I again won't go into details. It's a very easy to use self-assessment sheet is there. A lot of points are there where you have to do the scoring, and then the various criteria have indicators and so on. So any proposal that you want to, either you have already done the intervention and you want to assess how much it is adhering to, how much of it is nature-based solution. So you can score it against the standard, and also find out the gap areas where improvements can be made. Or if there is a proposal and you want to see whether it is nature-based compliant or not, again the standard will come to your can be used for that. This is just some of the examples of NBS applications across the various ecosystems. We have taken a kind of a river basin example where right from the watershed protection in case of our Himalayan region, the spring shed conservation and protection, protection of providing space for rivers, because we have seen so much of flooding incidents, urban flooding also, which can be prevented if we provide space for rivers. And many of you may have heard about the famous Room for Rivers project in Netherlands, where actually the people they left room for rivers to move, to flow naturally, which really reduced the costs incurred because of the flooding damages. And this is again a very important nature-based solution in current context, where we have been seeing so many flooding incidents all across. And then of course coastal ecosystems, mangroves is an example. Then urban green and blue spaces, like I said, the urban forests, the bioswales, the green roofs, many such solutions are available now in the urban context too. And sustainable agriculture, agroforestry, natural farming, many of the government is also coming up with this green credit scheme, water credit scheme. So all this is going to really spur the application of nature-based solutions. This is a case study where we have been working on the forest landscape restoration as part of the India's Bond Challenge commitment of restoring 26 million hectares of degraded and deforested land by 2030. We have been applying various approaches in this, and details are available with us, and if you can visit the website or contact us for more details. This is again natural infrastructure for water management at various levels. We have been using this approach in the Meghna River Basin in the northeastern part of India. Again, details are available with us. Please do contact us. In fact, we are currently, focusing a lot on youth engagement, and that's where my linkage with this, this group also comes in. That the Meghna Youth Water Futures Program we are launching in November, and we will be inviting many of you for that launch. It will be held in Tripura, so hope many of you can make it. Again, that's the engaging youth for how water futures of the Meghna River Basin can be, looked at. So, and here ICN also, Academy also offers a certificate professional program for any of the young professionals to become NBS professionals, certified professionals, where you can use the NBS standards to really look at the projects and certify them. So that's all for now from my side. Any questions, I'll be happy to take. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Chatterjee, for taking us through, for setting the context for this session, getting us aligned with this umbrella term which has been used so widely these days, and also sharing the different ways with us so that the youth and normal citizen can also be engaged in such solutions. Thank you so much for that. Now moving on from here, another aspect of getting nature-based solution right is adopting right strategies, as also making these solutions more local, making sure that they are developed with the grassroots organization. They must be inclusive, transparent, and developed with the local people's view. And to talk more about the strategies for nature-based solution and the climate science education, to make it simpler and easier to understand for the grassroots level stakeholders, we have Dr. Arvind Anil Boas. He is superannuated from the post of Principal Chief Conservator of Forest and Head of Forest Force, Government of Chhattisgarh. He also served as the Director General for South Asia Cooperative Environment Program, which is an intergovernment multilateral organization. Also a chairperson for Care for Earth Society. And the list of his achievement is really long. He has contributed to more than 170 papers. With this, please welcome Dr. Boaz for his presentation. You can use this, or you want to? Okay.
Well, thank you, Sheetal, for introducing me to this important topic. Actually, I'm very thankful to Dr. Burman, Ramboj, and Praveen, who have invited me to this conference. Actually, my topic here is quite different to what we normally talk about nature-based solutions, because I think nature-based solutions should be more local, more at the grassroots level, use local resources, and also be for the local people. So I think there lies the whole crunch of the issue, and that is why I have chosen this topic today of strategies for nature-based solutions for sustainable development and climate science education, to make it simpler and easy to understand for grassroots level stakeholders. Now, grassroots level stakeholders we can all define as the local village people, the forest fringe area population, as well as the local government machinery that we have at the local level. I think most of those people are not very educated, and I think to make them understand this jargon that we have developed about all this climate science, I think is very difficult for them. So I have worked with the forest department for nearly 40 years at the topmost level, and also I have been established the climate center in Chhattisgarh, and I established it in 2009. And I think getting closer to the people is the most important thing, I think, for both sustainable education and climate science. So I think we all know this, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Firstly, it is universal. That means it is applicable to all, right from the topmost people to the grassroots level. It is very aspirational. It wants to leave nobody behind, but I think most of the grassroots level people are actually left behind. Then it is very transformational. It has new paradigms and strategy shifts that we have got, but we have only limited ourselves to major strategy shifts. The minor strategy shifts that will actually yield results has not yet come in. It is very integrated and holistic, because every goal in this agenda is linked directly or indirectly to another one, and it converts trade-offs into synergies, as the achievements of one goal has both positive and negative impacts on the others. Then a major strategy here is back to nature, because nature-based sustainable education is the driver and guide for traveling along the road to achieve all these goals. So this is the way that we want to transform the world. We have a social well-being, we have the governance at the top that will have a major impact on the economy, and it should be actually conducive to the cultures and ethics of the local population. Then the environmental well-being is there. We should respect the limits of natural ecosystems that we are failing to do now. Now, this is a transition to a resilient and sustainable world. Human well-being and planetary health nurtured within the just and a transparent governance framework. Now, a just and transparent governance framework should be guided by fundamental principles, ethics, and values adapted from nature-based traditional knowledge systems. Now, as we all know, India has been a storehouse of traditional knowledge, and this traditional knowledge is inbuilt at the grassroots level. It is not I'm sorry to say, in these big cities and the big conferences that we attend. We want to eliminate poverty. We want to manage water, food, and energy nexus. We want to secure our biodiversity. We want urbanization and industrialization to go hand in hand with our environmental goals. Mitigation of climate change, natural disasters, and hazard risks is one of the major roles. And this is the point that at this point of time, we are having so many disasters. Some say because of climate change. It may be one of the reasons, but I think there are other reasons to all this climate change. Then jobs and livelihoods for the youth. We see youth at the urban level have a lot of jobs that are there for them to take. But when you go to the rural areas, especially tribal areas and fringe forest area villages, there you see that youth are really not served well as far as the jobs and livelihoods is concerned. Then all this leads to a major issue, that is pure peace, security, and equity. Now, everything that we have just now said has led to a very serious situation, because we are in trouble now, as the education for sustainable development is threatened, as it is becoming too complex and technical. I had developed the State Action Plan on Climate Change of Chhattisgarh, and I understand how complex was it to transform the IPCC reports and all for grassroots level workers. I think that is a very major issue that we should look into, and I think what better forum than to express my views here. It is very difficult for local grassroots level vulnerable stakeholders. I say vulnerable because they are at the receiving end of everything bad that we do to nature. And not only they fail to understand, but they are absolutely confused whether their traditional knowledge, you must have heard about that great tsunami thing in Andaman Nicobar, where the so-called highly educated people were worst affected, and even the naval base in Nicobar was completely wiped out. But the tribals there, they actually, not one of them was killed, because I don't know, they had an early warning system, and they went about 3 or 4 days before that tsunami to the upper reaches. Now the traditional knowledge system that was handed to them over the ages has given them positive results thus far. But should they adapt that, or the one that is being talked about by the current educators, I call them, on TV, radio, social media, in schools and colleges, should that be adopted, as in most cases it cannot be translated on the ground? As we all know that there is a huge disconnect between the education system, not only the education system of subjects and all, but even nature-based solutions at all levels, and we have failed to impart efficient and practical knowledge to the local masses and educators, who are always at the receiving end of all complicated education systems. So this is the cry of the indigenous people. We were the first cradle of education for sustainable development. I call them the first cradle of education for sustainable development, because our villages were actually a completely self-contained entity. Everything was recycled. These 3R and the 5R approaches that we have developed over the years were all there at our village level. Our village was a unit that was completely sustainable. We facilitate and support us, for we are the children of Mother Earth. She has taught us how to handle her. We, the indigenous people and the local population, have looked after their mothers for till now. But now they find themselves helpless because they are caught in between two worlds. With changing times, support and enhance our knowledge, but we should not try to start with a clean slate. What we are trying to do, we want to wipe out whatever knowledge they have, the traditional knowledge they have, and teach them anew the new paradigm of knowledge that we have developed. We should try to teach things that are above what their basic indigenous knowledge is there. And we should not teach them something that is alien to them, difficult to understand, and not so practical at that grassroots level, and is applicable to the environment conservation that they live in. Now, these are some of the strategies that I thought should be adopted for sustainable development, both for climate science and other sustainable goals. Firstly, keep it local. Bring in participation, share knowledge with them. Don't teach them anew. Share your knowledge with them and try to have a fusion between the two. And build capacities of local governments, community groups, and youth. Then identify opportunities where you can facilitate and support the local traditional knowledge with easily understandable and adaptable technicalities of ESDs and climate science, to make such education palatable to the local education for quick long-term results. The results that we find, I mean, even in the forestry sector, I have learned many of my forestry goals by sitting on stream sides with tribal youth and tribal elders who know much more than I think we foresters that we are taught in various institutes. We should sharpen and align traditional age-old skills and jobs for green development, greening economic sectors, small, low carbon and resilient infrastructure, integrating ecosystem services in reducing infrastructure loads, and also addressing energy and resource efficiency in education system at the local level, circular economies, and climate proofing developing to use as used to happen in old times in our villages. Like I just said, it was a self-sustaining, zero-waste, climate-compatible entity. Our villages, many of our interior villages, are still like that. We should also use local soft impact entry points. What we do is build heavy infrastructures that actually destroy our environment. We have built a lot of dams on our streams. In Chhattisgarh, we have nearly killed many of our major rivers, especially the Mahanadi, and all the streams that go into it. And we should also try to have soft entry points in other sectors like agriculture, health and pollution control, and also build communication linking local to the global and vice versa. So what needs to be done is to educate the vulnerable communities, keep local people, local resources and local technologies. A lot of local technologies are available. We just need to study and upgrade them rather than put in new technologies. These are some of the issues that are there. We should educate local people to carry out development work and with local resources, local technology without destroying natural resources. We see such a large destruction of forest in mining and infrastructure. But I think if we have village as our base point for development, then we can adopt these low cost, local acceptability, identification with local population, and feeling of ownership by the local population. These are the Abuj Mariyat, I think one of the most primitive tribes, and in Chhattisgarh. We should learn and support their traditional knowledge about forest sustainability and medicinal plant. Since Dr. Burman is there, I think medicinal plants are one of the most important things at the grassroots level. And I think many of the local Veds, I made a booklet of around 1500 local Veds that are practicing local Veds in Chhattisgarh. It is a publication that is there. So these have right from bones to heart to cancer even. We have lots of big people coming to Bastar and Kanker to get cured by these local Veds. I call them folklore Veds. So this is a thing that can be studied and replicated at the level, at the higher level. So we should co-create the world they want to live in and not what we want them to adapt to suit our conveniences, policies and governance structure. This is what we are trying to do, and that is backfiring. Education for sustainable development should be built upon the existing knowledge of local stakeholders and the ends of both sustainable development and climate objectives. These can be achieved in time and nature, and its resources will be conserved for our future generation. So this is what I wanted to convey to you, and then we can have this pristine forest once again adorning our earth. And I think these are the wetlands that we will be able to regenerate again if we go back to our traditional knowledge systems. And then again we'll have all the rainfall and covered hills with our forests, and then let us think global but act local. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Dr. Boaz, for sharing this very important aspect of developing any nature-based solution, developing it locally. And we know that indigenous people have been increasingly recognized as the custodian of our environment, our biodiversity, forest. They respect wildlife, and they also have a very key role in tackling the biodiversity and climate crisis. And you have stressed enough on the indigenous knowledge system also, which comes it with. So thank you very much for that. Despite its clear and very well accepted by our expert community, the role of nature and ecosystem plays, be it our social or economic development, or be it the environment. But the pathway for its implementation, like we all know that it's still long, and we are facing different barriers. And one of the key way for upscaling the use of nature-based solution still lies in creating awareness, strengthening the knowledge about the natural world early in life and throughout our education. And to talk more about the nature-based education, we have Dr. Iraq Barucha. Dr. Iraq Barucha has been active in wildlife and nature conservation for nearly 50 years. He is a very well-known wildlife photographer, has traveled and studied Indian national parks and wildlife sanctuaries extensively for over last 30 years. Dr. Barucha heads the Bharatiya Vidyapeeth Institute of Environment Education and Research, and he is also a surgeon by profession. He has authored textbook of environmental studies for undergraduate courses and books on conservation and biodiversity. I have myself read Dr. Barucha's book during my undergraduation. So to talk more about the nature-based education, please welcome Dr. Barucha.
Thank you, Sheetal. That was a very long introduction. with everybody's permission, I'm going to talk from down there. I'm not going to give a presentation. I'm going to make you think of simulating that 2 million years ago, old man and his spouse is sitting in the plains of Africa, and there are their kids around there, and he's having a snooze in the afternoon, and his better half tells him, "Hey, get up, you lazy bum, and teach these people what you actually know, how to hunt, how to collect things from the grasslands and the forest patches, how we need to get water." He said, "Get out and do this." And getting out and doing that is not really his scene. But he finally agrees to do that. And then he realizes that when he takes his kids out there, he has to contend with 6 other species of homo, of his own clan, more or less. And these 6 species are his competition, and he realizes that he'd better get out of there and find some more place to go. And so 62,000 years ago, this Homo sapiens and his progeny land up in the plains of India, and they settle down in the Satpura in India, and they develop cave hunting practices there. And that's what the earliest part of nature education actually does. Can you keep the slides on, please? So he now finds that he has to, the generation after generation, no, that's right, have to actually look at what happens around them. And so the Homo sapiens, very early Homo sapiens, actually are hunter-gatherers. But by the time we come to the 2nd century BC, and that's a very big jump, there are areas where elephant reserves have been formed. There's a great emperor called Ashoka, and he writes edicts. And in one of his edicts, he writes that, well, at least some of these species that we hunt today should actually be preserved. And so he precedes IUCN by several hundred years in making a list of red list of animals and plants and birds and whatever. And that Ashoka's edicts actually tell his people and the people who actually go out and talk to people about these species. Next, please, Sita. Will you change? Right. So let's jump another lot of steps, right? And now we've got this new area, this new Homo sapiens, who's looking at biology, and Darwin has come out and said there's an origin of species, and there is a whole bioregional approach to species which starts coming out. They learn about paleontology, and they learn about tectonic plate movements, and so on. So this is a period where they're exploring the world's flora and fauna for the first time in a very more scientific way than hunting and gathering. And here you have this beautiful cover of a book of Himalayan plants by Hooker. And there are a whole lot of these Western things which now get sort of merged into what we already had as traditional knowledge systems in a very different format. Next, please, Gita. So let's take a snapshot at this now. And if we look at this Indian context in this snapshot, we have nature education, which actually started in the BNHS in the 1930s. There was Salim Ali. Salim Ali, incidentally, was the first nature educator the BNHS ever employed. He was an ornithological scientist, but that's what he did. And then there's this focus primarily on taxonomy. You take kids out, and you show them 20 species of birds and 30 species of plants, which they forget instantly. So this is what nature education was in the BNHS, the WWF. It was a taxonomic way of looking at the world. If you come to the 1980s, now you're starting to see change. You're seeing a very bitter world. You're seeing pollution, you're seeing energy issues, you're seeing health problems due to environmental changes, and you get this great guy called M.C. Mehta, who puts a court case, a PIL, saying that if government doesn't do something about this, you're going to be at a huge loss. This is something that he talks about, and NCRT then has been forced to respond to that. And so has the Ministry of Environment. And at my institute, we do this large study of 2,000 textbooks across India to try and understand what are the gaps, what is there in the geography, science, language textbooks that can be related to environment, and how do we put these concepts in. And several states then follow up on this activity. So the problem with that is that this environment education that we first saw it was a sort of turn off. Whereas nature education was a strong turn on, this was a very unfortunate turn off. Because we are putting the weight of the world on these children's shoulders. And it doesn't work that way. Come to the 2019, and something happens, right? This all comes from the Brundtland report and the Rio conference, where we find that it's a change. We need to talk about these things, but we have to tell children that you can do something. And that do was the very important part of it, and we got CEE, CPR ourselves there in Pune. And this was there, but it was a complex issue to bring about, which you very rightly brought out today. And finally, when you really look at what it is, if you want to connect these things together, you have to come back to reorienting nature education in a new form. And that reorienting nature education, which you get from going out into the forest or the grassland or the wetland and say, oh, but this is also in your textbook in the cycles of nature that you learn about, right? So this linkage to school education is what we should be doing in terms of sustainable education. So we look at this in a little more detail, quickly. So if you look at what was our history in the 1800s and 1900s, you had British medical practitioners who were sent out, and they were told in their very joining thing that you will go to India and botanize. And that was because they valued our plants. It was not only spices, it was plants for horticulture, it was plants for their gardens, right? And then there was this new change where experts developed from the non-professional botanists and zoologists, F.W. Champion, Jim Corbett. These were people who wrote fabulous stories. And those fabulous stories brought about a lot of interest. And there's one person who we unfortunately forgot about, and that was Tagore. Because Tagore talked very deeply about the deep parts of nature education. And he brought out these things in terms of festivals, he brought out these things as seasonal change. He thought about how you could bring that into drama and dance. So this was Tagorean philosophy of education, which was in the 1930s a huge breakthrough, but we forgot that. Unfortunately, we forgot what Tagore said. And then you have BNHS and BSI and ZSI searching for more plants, searching for more animals, whatever. Next, please. So let's look a little at this post-independence era. And the earliest part of this is that even before independence, Salim Ali becomes a sort of torch bearer. And here you see Salim Ali standing there. He is teaching blind students what animals look like by taking them in a museum and making them feel them. Now, this is far, far beyond what we do today. And this is the vision of this man who actually, he was a scientist, come educator, come socialist, come a polyglot. And he talked about ecosystem studies for the first time. So he brought about Bharatpur as a wetland. He looked at Point Calumet as a seashore area. He looked at bird migration studies and rigging. So BNHS, SACON, WWF now take over a sort of thing with school kids, which says nature is beautiful, it's fascinating, and it's complex, right? And they try to unravel this. So this is something that happened through this post-independence era. And very interestingly, next please, Sita, you find that this nature is wondrous and exciting becomes one way of setting up these eco clubs. WWF had more than 2,000 eco clubs at that period of time, and they ran those extremely well. And then there were trekkers and mountaineers, wetland, all these bird watchers. You can't forget them, right? And this is where we found that we needed to become some sort of hub in terms of trying to change this aspect of taxonomy into ecological studies. So this nature is wonderful and exciting was a very big change in the way we did nature education. Next, please. Well, environment education, I said, placing the weight of the Anthropocene impacts on children and youth. How did we have to, what was this? This was a big challenge, that you wanted to tell them that the world was deteriorating, ecosystems were getting lost, but we wanted to also tell them that you can become part of the answer. And this is where a whole lot of pollution issues, social issues, health issues got linked. And therefore, this is one way that we thought we would use the Anthropocene in a positive way. Next, please. So what do we do from this? We believe that we have a very large environmental footprint, and we don't do too much about it. Let's change that paradigm into a smaller footprint wherever we can for day-to-day life, but use a bigger handprint. And this concept was brought in by a little schoolgirl, and now it's spread over South Africa and it's gone to Germany. But this is one little Indian schoolgirl who at a conference said, well, let's do something about handprints for change. So we can make the world a better place to live in becomes the message. Next, please. So education for sustainable development now comes by learning by doing, by action-based learning. And I think this is very, very important, because our experience with kids is if you do these programs and projects, and we currently run this in 45 schools, we find the change is very perceptible. We also feel, though we have very little proper evidence of this, and that is that this does communicate itself to the family. And we run these things in rural schools, there are Zilla Parishad schools, where there's nothing else. So for them to see a slideshow like this is an experience. So learning by doing looks at the environment part of it, the social part of it, the economic part of it. Next, please. So the next is what my favorite thing is, and that is the return to nature-based education. And this is the need for a refurbished approach. You have to change this. So experiential learning, observational science, the excitement of discovery. Look at this spider. He's making his web. And that big spider that you see there is the female. That little fellow you see there is a male. And once they mate, she's going to eat him up. So there are a whole lot of messages that you can give. You pick up a piece of soil and you ask people, you've learned about the nitrogen cycle in class. How does it work? What do insects do in that? What do the fungi do in that? How does this happen? What happens when those green leaves are transpiring and when the whole water cycle is happening through this? How are you visualizing that? So this visualization, I made you visualize as if you are Stone Age people, but you're not, right? So that is why you're unable to do that. You'll change this viewpoint if you perhaps go back to the Stone Age. So the change from taxonomy to ecology brings about an interconnectedness to nature. And that's what most of us do from my Environment Institute. Next, please. And there the discovery of nature in nature becomes very important, because you can look at species, you can look at ecosystems, you can look at even genetic variations. And internalizing these values of biological diversity takes you actually into what climate change is doing to us. And I think that is the very big message. How do you link this whole business of biodiversity conservation to climate action? Because they are both so closely interwoven and rarely talked about. Next, please. So from nature watching to locale specific nature-based experiential learning becomes the paradigm. And there are a whole lot of things to learn about this, the biogeographic zones in India, because we are all different. Looking at it state-wise doesn't make too much sense. Looking at it as 10 major biogeographic zones gives you a link of nature experiences to what they have in their class books, in their textbooks. It's there, but it's, I shouldn't say this, it's so bad that it puts kids off. So if you do this, you use this inherent biophilia, which every human being has this biophilia. They love nature. It's inherent in human cultural values. It's there. It's just that spark that you need to do. Next, please. Ideally, this learning by doing is using what happens when you use public transport, or what happens when you use consumer goods, or how do you do this 3 hours. Becomes something real, not by telling it, but by making it happen, by making it actually happen in the classroom, in the school. So what we use is what we refer to as a whole school approach. We start with the principal, right? That's the toughest part. And then when you go down, you find that kids are the easiest to prime. So climate change and sustainability is linked to these individual lifescapes. And unless you make it locale specific, it doesn't work. And that is where the good interpreter is actually able to do this in nature last. So critical thinking is now, of course, become a very big thing. It's learning through field observations. It's saying what afforestation does and why you need to do it. And addressing these linkage between climate change and biodiversity becomes a solution in itself. And this perhaps is the way to go forward in making these children think rather than telling them what you have to do. Next, please. So Sheetal, this is the last slide. And this is the linkage of what I've been talking about to the school formal educational process. I think this is critically necessary. So you do this experiential learning, you apply this to biogeochemical cycles, which you learn in the 9th standard. You explain the need for biodiversity when they're talking about species, and the textbooks sometimes give very wrong impression of species. We once did a study of these 2,000 textbooks, and we had hilarious drawings in that. And I remember one very, very well. There was a picture of a fish, and there was a picture of a whale. So the first thing is that they were of the same size. Then I noticed that on the head of the whale, there was a fin. And I said, good God, why has this guy drawn a whale with a fin on his head? And then I realized this artist must have seen a whale's picture which was spouting. And he made it into a fin. Now, these kind of misconceptions can come through unless we look very carefully. Similarly, we need to understand how the 3 R's work in terms of waste management and actually get it to happen. We have lovely stories about this as well, which were probably very negative to the 3R process. So sustainable use and climate adaptation, mitigation, these are complex phenomena, but they can be done if you do them out in the field. And that takes you back into that cycle of experiential learning. So thank you very much. Last slide. The last slide is my Bharati Vidyapith Institute of Environment Education, where we teach MSc students and also make them go out to rural schools to transmit that knowledge at the school level. Thank you very much.
So, thank you, Dr. Bharucha. It's always a pleasure listening to you, and thank you for taking us to this super interesting journey of us Homo sapiens and the journey of our nature education, and also highlighting the need of reorientation of nature-based education, and also the requirement of this critical systems thinking, which is very crucial component of a very truly democratic active citizenship. And through your presentation, of course, like there is also a need, there also seems to be a clear need to increase the attention for nature in school education, curricula of universities, business, professional training, to restore the connection between the people and the biodiversity and the ecosystems that surround us. Now, coming to the next topic, we in this session, we also wanted to touch upon on the nature-based solution for private sectors and the opportunity it provides for green jobs, especially for the young generation, and also for the communities who are working or who are very closely associated with the nature. We know that more than half of the world's GDP is dependent on the nature, and we also know that more than 1.2 billion jobs are there in the sector such as farming, fishery, forestry, tourism, which are directly dependent on nature. So we thought that it is also important to kind of touch upon the, how private sector can play a role and how there is now increasing opportunity for the young generation in the nature-based sector and also in the form of green jobs. And to talk more about this, we have Mr. Abhijit Sharan. He's my colleague, Senior Manager for Nature-Based Solution at South Pole. Abhijit comes with the background of working on agriculture and forestry project, their implementation, and as well as the certification based on several internationally benchmark sustainability standards. Prior joining to South Pole, he was managing the Indian assurance team at Better Cotton Initiative. He has also managed and audited under forest management standards developed by Forest Stewardship Council. Abhijit has around decade of experience in working in agriculture and forest sustainability with several NGOs, industries, ministry and state government in India. Please welcome Abhijit.
Thank you, Sheetal, for that introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Abhijit Sharan, and since our very experienced and esteemed panel has already set a context for nature-based solutions, I'm going to talk today about the role of private sector in nature-based solution projects, and I'll also talk a bit on the green jobs. So I have divided today's presentation into two parts. The first part we'll talk about the private sector and NBS projects. So I'll just go through the major industries that are, directly based on using natural resources or extracting natural resources, which could be the mining industry, iron and steel, oil exploration, power generations, even food and beverages, agriculture, and forestry-based industries. These industries really have their most of the dependence on natural resources, and they have identified, something called as ecosystem services that the nature provides. As you can see here, the scientists and the economists have studied these ecosystem services and have classified these into four types of ecosystem services that the nature provides, which are like provisioning services, regulating, cultural and supporting services. But today I'll just focus a bit on the provisioning services, basically the services which already have a market value and they are extracted from the nature, and money is made out of them. So using natural resources, by extracting metals, minerals, or rare earth minerals, they are used for making steel for buildings, aluminium, copper, and other rare earth metals are also used in electronics such as our smartphones. Land, water, and soil are really what is needed for farming that produces our food and drinks and the clothes we wear. And then coal, oil, and gas. These are basically fossil fuels, which are used to generate energy, which powers almost everything that we know of. And even services like finance, education, healthcare, and telecommunications that don't directly depend on natural resources, but they do rely on infrastructure, technology, and energy that are built and power using the natural resources. And lately, over the past several decades, I would say that the amount of materials used in such production and consumption is continuing to rise at the global level, and the rate at which the minerals are being extracted globally is outpacing both the population and economic growth, which means that we are using more materials less efficiently. And according to United Nations, if such kind of business as usual continues, the global resource extraction will increase 110% by the year 2060. So we all already know what negative impacts of natural resource exploitation could be. The environmental impacts, of course, are climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. There are also many socio-economic impacts. There is threat to livelihoods. More than 1 billion farmers globally are directly affected due to this. There's food and economic insecurity, nutrition and health issues. Even we are facing such nutrition and health issues in our daily life and in the urban centers. And the poorer the nation, the more is their vulnerability, but due to the domino effect, this is also impacting the richer nations and will impact the richer nations sooner rather than later. So the climate change and the global warming has become a global issue, and 2020 was one of the warmest years on record. During the COVID-19 pandemic, due to the lockdowns world over, factories shut down and the transportation sector coming to an halt, the emissions did dip a little, but there was no significant difference to the long-term climate change goals that we have. And fossil fuels still account for over 80% of the global final energy consumption. So the UN scientists have indicated that we just have 10 years to cut global greenhouse gas emissions significantly before reaching a point of no return. And so in 2015, around 200 nations had met in Paris under the UNFCCC, and they all came to a consensus that we need to significantly reduce our carbon emissions to a point that the average global temperatures do not exceed, from the pre-industrial revolution temperatures, they do not exceed by 2 degrees Celsius by the turn of 21st century. And the more ambitious goal was to contain them within the 1.5 degrees Celsius. But what many of us don't realize is that we have already reached or crossed the 1.2 degree warming mark since 2020. And so it's not, we do not need to cap it, from 0 to 2. It is rather 1.2 to within 2 degrees Celsius in the next, 70 years maybe. So that is really something that needs to be recognized world over, and it has been increasingly felt that the government pledges are currently not enough to keep us within that goal, and that's where the private sector is key, in terms of acting towards realizing our climate goals. So what does the private sector need to do? So this is the business as usual scenario of carbon emissions up till the year 2070. And you see a point on the x-axis over here that the red line passes through. That is the goal of achieving net zero. So the private sector really needs to work on reducing their carbon emissions and decarbonizing the industries. And whatever emissions they are not able to reduce, they should be able to compensate for them by basically funding such nature-based solution projects in anywhere across the world, which essentially helps in reducing carbon emissions. And so the residual emissions could also be neutralized and will help us realize the goal of net zero that every country today is pledging about. So the private sector intervention could be through various measures such as NGO or the corporate social responsibility initiatives, which are focused on social as well as environmental aspects. There are many voluntary environmental certification standards which aim towards better management and accountability of industries dealing with natural resources like forests, water, aquatic and marine sources, and also agriculture. There are carbon standards which deal with reducing or removing greenhouse gas emissions through financial instruments and market-based fundings. And lately, we also have many climate startups coming up, which are really working on activities such as climate smart agriculture, climate smart forestry, introducing technologies, innovative technologies, which basically helps farmers reduce their inputs such as fertilizers or even pesticides on their fields, which lead to lesser emissions. So the climate startups are also doing a very interesting job in the private sector. The company I'm working with, South Pole, is essentially working in the carbon credits market. So since almost the last 20 years, we have been working with corporates, capital markets, and also the public sector to reduce their impacts on climate change while mitigating risk and creating value for their sustainability journeys. We have been providing innovative sustainability solutions to a lot of corporates. We have a diverse expertise of more than 700 sustainability advisors, scientists, engineers who are leading experts in their fields, and we are present all over the world. We have 24 offices globally, and we have worked on over 700 projects, and which makes us the largest carbon action projects developers globally. So the carbon credits usually compensate for the unavoidable emissions that a company creates today by financing projects that reduce or absorb carbon emissions anywhere in the world. So the nature doesn't see your nationality or the geographical boundaries. If you reduce emissions anywhere in the world, it helps the overall global scenario. And carbon credits can increase the health and prosperity of communities, which are key to such projects that we develop around the world, and combat climate change by financing projects that could not otherwise have happened. So this takes me to the part 2 of my presentation, which is about green jobs. I made these couple of slides especially for the relatively younger members of our audiences who may be working in this sector since the past few years, or even students who are thinking about working in this sector and are maybe confused about how to approach it and what kind of opportunities are there. The first question that anyone who wants to come into this sector is, what kind of educational background or training should I have to basically start working in this sector? So you could be from literally any sector: research, economics, communication, law, architecture, even coding or analytics. Since I talked about startups and all these places, they require each and every expertise that is mentioned here. And it has been my personal observations that over the last decade, the number and the types of green jobs has been growing, and the educational eligibilities or the training that one requires are no more restricted to only environmental education or sciences or engineering degrees. So since I had just so much real estate on the slide, I could not provide the whole list, and I don't think I even know the whole list, though the list of such backgrounds and trainings goes on and on. So who could be the employers in these green jobs? These could be NGOs, government departments, ministries. Just a kilometer away from here, we have the Minister of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, which is, working with a lot of even private sectors, multilateral funders, bilateral funders. There are universities, there are research institutes, think tanks that are working in this sector. The CSR wings of corporates have also, realized to start working on, projects on nature-based solutions, such as, raising plantations or reducing their carbon emissions through carbon sequestration activities. There are consultancies. I talked about the startups. There are certification bodies which are essentially, working as auditors for the environmental standards or the carbon standards I talked about. And there are environmental standard-setting bodies and the environmental project developers, such as us from South Pole. So, yeah. Now, coming to some challenges or that you might come across while working in this sector is that in the initial years, it might not be a very well-paying job as compared to your peers in working in the corporate sector. Your friends and family might not understand ever that what you actually do. But these jobs are very dependent on, they are very hands-on and are dependent on practical knowledge, which needs to be regularly updated in sync with the global events that are going on and the policies that are being formulated. And you will most likely be required to travel to, far off remote places to work on such projects. These travels can be long, bumpy, tiring, and they won't care about the ideal weather conditions that you would like. The flip side or the good side of these jobs is, again, the last point that I talked about, the challenges, is that you will be required to travel a lot, and which will actually give you a very different perspective and a very good learning curve working in this sector. It never gets boring. You are working on all types of projects, all types of communities that you interact with. Trust me, it never gets boring. There are immense options and opportunities within the climate change and sustainability umbrella. The nature-based solution projects, that you can identify and work in, and getting to feel the on-the-ground realities will actually help you grow professionally, but also, personally. And I talked about, some jobs not being very well paying in the initial years of your career, but as the trend has been going in the past decade, I have seen the average pay go up due to the growing number of job opportunities and the urgencies of the countries also to meet their climate goals. With all the NDCs and everything, there are a lot of funding being pumped into this sector. So the opportunities are growing, so is the average pay. And also, you will be working on directly contributing in the efforts to save humanity from driving off the climate cliff. So there are a lot of things to be done. There are a lot of opportunities. We just don't have a lot of time on it. So yeah, thank you. That was it from my side. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Abhijit. Too often, nature and economy are placed in opposition. This may seem like a real trade-off maybe for the short term, but in the long term, the truth is that there is no decent job on a dead planet. And we are seeing that the range of nature-based solutions are creating new jobs and opportunity for the young generation. So, coming to the last part of the session, we have now seen the various angle. We have understood the nature-based solution, what are the nitty-gritties, the role of nature, the education and nature-based solutions, the impact and the importance of local community in developing these solutions. So let's see that how these practices or these solutions can be put into practice. And for this, let's listen to our next speaker, Dr. Atoho Jakula, about various initiatives on nature-based solution with the application of education sustainability in Nagaland. Dr. Atoho Jakula is the Director of Climate Studies and Knowledge Solution Center, the Government of Nagaland. He is also returning expert alumni of the German Government Center of International Migration and Development to push the sustainability development agenda in India. He has over 14 years of experience in research, policy and practice in the areas of agriculture, climate change and natural resource management, gained in academia, government, not-for-profit sectors in India, UK and Germany. Dr. Atoho, we welcome you to share us with the various initiatives you have been taking in the Nagaland.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am in such accomplished company and I feel so intelligent already. So thank you for your very enlightening talk. I want to start off my presentation by thanking the Mobius Foundation, because they not only support such important conversations, but also support initiatives to translate these conversations into practical action. Because the presentation that I'm going to make is based on a project, it's called the Mobius Young Climate Leaders for Himalayan Development Project, which is being funded by the Mobius Foundation. So I, on behalf of the government of Nagaland, express our gratitude to our chairman who was here, Shri Pradeep Burman, and of course our president who is here, Shri Praveen Garg sir, and to the Mobius family. So where does this project fit into this conversation that we're having? So I'll take you through the regional context, the national and the global context, and finally to the local context. So when we look at the regional context, Nagaland/Northeast, it has 1/4 of India's total forest cover. It falls under the all-important Indo-Burma biodiversity hotspot. It has been identified as one of the most vulnerable regions to climate change. It has, very importantly, 88% of the land and forest is owned by the communities and individuals. So, community-centric, nature-based solution is at the heart of all these conversations. And most importantly, over the last 2 consecutive report of the Indian State of Forest Report, it has actually indicated that there has been a decline in the forest cover in the Northeast region. Now, if we really look into the global and the national conversation that we're having, first of all, in way back in 2015 at the Paris Climate Conference, forests were declared as key climate solutions because of their role in carbon sequestration. And to that, India has given a lot of commitment. I mean, if we really look through some of the few commitments, it has committed to actually increase the forest cover from 24 to 33% by the year 2020. And under the Green India Mission, which is under the National Action Plan for Climate Change, they have committed to increase or improve 10 million hectares of forest and 50 to 60 million tons of carbon sequestration. UNFCCC 2.5 to 3 billion tons of carbon sequestration by 2020. And of course the bond challenge, which is a voluntary commitment. They have committed to restore 13 million hectares by 2020 and an additional 8 million hectares by 2030. So that's a lot of work to be done. So what local action we take here in the Northeast has huge implication for India's own commitment to climate change and also the commitment it has made to the international community. So this project that I'm about to just tell you in brief is a project which has been supported by the Department of Forest in partnership with University of Cambridge, and also the Health Advisor, Nagaland Board of Secondary Education, and it's been implemented by YouthNet. So for this project, 14 young professionals have been selected, who some of us are here in today present. So what these young professionals are going to be doing, or are already doing, falls under two components. The first component is a school education component, where we are implementing the Pani Paha curriculum, which was across 15 participating schools, which was developed at University of Cambridge out of their project outcome in the Indian Himalayas. So essentially the essence to implement this curriculum is to sow the intellectual foundations within a young child, to help him understand why their individual action is so important in this the entire climate effort. Within this, I mean, it's not really nature-based related, but within this component, we have this waste management program, and where we are actually having these students bring in their trash, plastic and paper segregated. So this is also and they bring it every week, which is showing pretty good results. This actually feeds on to the failure of the government municipals to manage their waste properly, because it's a huge problem that trying to spend so much of money trying to build capacity as a community at the household level, but they're not being able to sort of practice this waste segregation. So this is also one way we are trying to infiltrate through these curriculum. We're trying to infiltrate into the community at the household level for these waste management. Now, coming to the nature-based solution component of this project, the young climate leaders are being trained by the forest officials on their ongoing, all aspects of project management on the ongoing JICA forestry project. So this is a 400 crore forestry project which has been supported by the Japanese government to actually rehabilitate shifting cultivation through agroforestry intervention. And as we all know, beekeeping is one important component of agroforestry, and it is widely recognized that beekeeping basically regenerates forests and increases crop production through its pollination services. So what these young professionals are doing, together with the forest department, we are building a framework around bee ecosystem. Because why we also choose bee is because the state of the state of Nagaland, we've just only tapped 6% of the potential of beekeeping in Nagaland. So we are trying to create a framework around beekeeping by mapping the actors, value chains and production systems, and see what kind of indigenous knowledge, management and practice support these production systems. So through this exercise, we are hoping to sort of upscale. We are hoping to educate the community, create enabling environment for to revive the honey sector through policy interventions. Last year at the COP conference in Egypt, our government had the honor of hosting an independent session at the India Pavilion, where it was around the theme indigenous knowledge and practices, where we sort of launched an international research initiative to translate indigenous knowledge and practice into concrete policy actions. So through these exercises that the project is undertaking also feeds into the overall research agenda of the state. So in very brief, I'm afraid, I know we are running out of time, but this is in very brief that we are doing through the support of the Mobius Foundation. Once again, very grateful. And this project is really educating the young children, the community, the government, and also educating the educated. So with these few words, I thank you for your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Atto. It was really enlightening to know about the initiative and also involvement of the young, the youth in these initiatives. So with this, we have come to the end of this session. We wanted to have an open dialogue at the end of session, but we have run out of time. We are anyways crossed the time which was allotted to us. So with this, we'll wrap up the session, but our some of our speakers would be here for the dinner, so please feel free to have a chat with them to know more about their initiative after this session. And to quickly wrap up this session and to quickly deliver the vote of thanks and present our respected speakers of a token of thanks, I would invite Bhavesh Swami on the dais.
Thanks, Sheetal. Things just reminded me, we were at Orissa, 2019 was the year, and we happened to be at one of the funny affected places. Someone told us, Dr. Bharucha, maybe your book made the gentleman understand as to what the local problems and the local solutions are. And what the solution was, too much of mosquitoes out there. He made up a repellent just out of the leaves and added a borolene to the overall paste. I don't know where it was coming from, but maybe some education, some understanding was there. Dr. Boas, thank you so much. You made a point. We ought to reconnect to nature. They are making brooms. The brooms is worth 50 lakh rupees business. That business is getting translated into plastic brooms of late. Just the transportation of those brooms to a city like Delhi or North India is in itself is more cost inclusive than local consumption. Maybe more things need to be revitalized. Power from youth need to be taken forward, how they can go to Bengal, how they can go to Vishakhapatnam to find second market for those nature-based products. Ma'am, you have been doing these policy works. Again, maybe these students who are learning these aspects, if those manuals are available, if those frameworks are available, I think that's need of the hour in terms of finding the rightful solution just at the click of the mouse. Mr. Abhijit, I think nothing more can be said when you are acting as a catalyst out there in terms of offering the product portfolio, where those solutions are needed, and what all we need to catalyze as a whole. Thank you so very much for doing it all. And last but not the least, Dr. Atoho, your kind of work, bringing in more students, bringing in those partnership with national, international universities is something that is needed more and more. What we learn from here, we can translate to more similar regions, and what we can learn from them ought to be augmented out here. With this, thanks for being a very wonderful audience. Please exchange business cards. Please exchange your learnings with each other over a cup of tea. We'll be more than happy to interact with each other. Thank you so very much.